Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to tackle one of the absolute coolest shortcuts in A-level chemistry, Hess's Law. It's this incredibly clever tool that lets us figure out the energy of reactions that are, well, almost impossible to actually measure in a lab. Okay, let's get right into it.
So here's the game plan. First up, we'll look at the core problem. Why do we even need this shortcut? Then we'll reveal the shortcut itself, Hess's Law. We're going to master two really powerful ways to use it, the visual enthalpy cycle method and the more step-by-step algebraic method, with plenty of examples. And of course, we'll wrap up with some top tips to help you smash it in your exams.
Okay, so first things first. Let's talk about that problem. Why on earth do chemists need a workaround like this? Well, it really all boils down to a pretty big challenge you face in the lab.
Just think about this for a second. Imagine you're trying to measure the heat given off when you form carbon monoxide from solid carbon. It's a nightmare to do directly. You'll almost always overshoot and make a ton of carbon dioxide instead. So what do? How do you find that energy value? You need to find another way, an indirect route. And this, right here, is exactly the kind of problem Hess's Law was born to solve. It gives us that elegant, indirect route when the direct one is basically a no-go. The best way to get your head around it is to think about climbing a mountain. The total change in your altitude, how high you've climbed, is going to be exactly the same whether you scale a sheer cliff face or you take a gentle, winding path all the way to the top. All that matters is your starting point and your finishing point. And guess what? Chemistry works in pretty much the same way.
So here it is, the official A-level definition. This whole thing works because enthalpy is what we call a state function. Now, that might sound like a fancy term, but all it really means is that it only cares about the starting state and the ending state, your reactants and your products, not the specific journey you took to get between them. Just like that mountain, the overall energy change is always the same.
So, how do we actually use this law? Let's get our hands dirty with our first method, a really visual approach called the enthalpy cycle. Now, I know drawing these cycles can look a little scary at first, but trust me, it's really just like putting a puzzle together. We've got a few pieces of information, and all we need to do is fit them together logically to see the complete picture.
The process is pretty much always the same, which is great news. We kick things off by putting our goal, the reaction we're trying to find, right at the top. Then, down at the bottom, we put a common intermediate state that everything can turn into. This is usually the combustion products, CO2 and water. This setup creates two different paths from our reactants to those intermediates, and thanks to Hess's Law, we know the energy change along both of those paths has to be identical, and that's what lets us solve for the unknown.
Okay, enough theory. Let's actually put this into practice. We're going to find the enthalpy of formation for propane. Now, this is a reaction you can't just measure directly because, carbon and hydrogen don't just spontaneously combine to make propane under normal conditions. And here's our data, just like you'd get in an exam question. We've got the standard enthalpies of combustion for carbon, for hydrogen, and for propane. These are our puzzle pieces.
All right, let's build this thing piece by piece. Step 1, our target equation goes at the top. That's carbon and hydrogen forming propane. We'll call this unknown energy change delta HF. Step 2, down at the bottom, we'll put our common intermediates, the combustion products, CO2 and H2O. Now for step 3, drawing the two routes. Route 1 is the indirect path. We burn our reactants, the carbon and the hydrogen, to get to the bottom. Route 2 involves first forming the propane, that's our unknown value, and then burning that propane to get to the very same intermediates. Since both routes start and end in the same place, their total energy change has to be equal.
So when we set those two routes equal to each other and do a little rearranging, we get this super useful formula. The enthalpy of formation is simply the total combustion energy of the reactants minus the combustion energy of the products. Now, all we have to do is plug in the numbers from our data table, and don't forget to multiply them by the right number of moles for the carbon and hydrogen. Punch that into the calculator, and boom, we get our answer, negative 106 kilojoules per mole. That negative sign tells us it's an exothermic reaction, right? It's releasing energy when propane is formed. Okay, so that was the visual way, but what if you're not a fan of drawing cycles? Well, good news. There's another tool in our toolbox, the algebraic method. This one is less about drawing and more about manipulating equations. And for this one, let's circle all the way back to that first problem we talked about, finding the enthalpy of formation for carbon monoxide, that reaction that's just so tricky to measure directly. So here's our setup. Up top, that's our target, our goal equation.
And below it, we've got the two related reactions where we do have solid, reliable data. Our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to combine equations 1 and 2 in just the right way to end up with our goal equation.
The whole game here is to make our given equations look like our goal equation. So let's look at equation 1. It's already got 1 mole of solid carbon on the left-hand side, the reactant side, just like our goal. Perfect. We'll leave that one exactly as it is. Now, what about equation 2? Well, in our goal, we need carbon monoxide as a product on the right side. But right now, it's a reactant. So what do? We just flip the entire equation around. And here is the most important part. When you reverse a reaction, you have to flip the sign of its enthalpy change so that negative 283 becomes a positive 283. Don't forget that bit. And now for the really cool part. We just add our two new equations together. And look, the carbon dioxide appears on both sides, so poof, they cancel each other out. And 1 mole of oxygen on the left minus half a mole on the right leaves us with just half a mole on the left. And would you look at that? We are left with our exact goal equation. And since we added the equations, it's as simple as adding their enthalpy values. So negative 394 plus 283 gives us our final answer, negative 111 kilojoules per mole. How cool is that? So you've seen the two methods. The big question now is, how do you make sure you get all the marks, especially when you're under pressure in an exam? Let's run through a quick checklist of things to remember.
Think of this as your pre-flight check before you answer a Hess's Law question. First, if you're drawing a cycle, label your arrows clearly with both the value and the direction. Second, always double-check that your equations are balanced. It's such an easy mark to lose. Third, look closely at the state symbols. Turning liquid water into water vapor costs energy, and that can change your whole answer. Fourth, the signs. This is the most common mistake. Double-check. Should it be negative for exothermic or positive for endothermic? And finally, if your equation needs, say, 3 moles of something, you have to remember to multiply its enthalpy value by 3.
So there you have it. Hess's Law isn't just a clever trick for exams. It really opens up this whole world